Welcome to the Madison Miller Podcast. Today is Thursday, December 3rd, 2020. Today I'm going to recap yesterday's AFC North showdown between the Ravens and the Steelers. We will look ahead to tonight's college football games. I believe it's one in Conference USA and one in the MWC. College basketball, we'll go over the scores from yesterday and look ahead to today's games. The Lakers making some more headlines today. We'll talk about that. The Masked Singer Super 6 semifinal and my best bet of the day. All right, we'll start with the NFL as the Pittsburgh Steelers remain undefeated at 11-0 with a 19-14 victory over the Baltimore Ravens. As the Steelers, as I said, go to 11-0, the Ravens drop to 6-5. So Week 12 is officially concluded. Ben Roethlisberger, 36 of 51, 266 yards, a touchdown and an interception. RG3 was 7 of 12, 33 yards and a pick. And then Trace McSorley came in at the end, 2 for 6, 77 yards and a touchdown. By the way, RG3, 7 carries for 68 yards. Had a big 39-yard run. And he looked like vintage RG3 in the second quarter there with that vintage run. Steelers got a defensive touchdown by Joe Hayden early on. And they looked rusty. And next up for Pittsburgh is home against Washington on Monday. Next for Baltimore is home for the Cowboys. So the two teams that played yesterday will be facing the NFC East next week. Now we'll go over the two college football games that will be played tonight. As I mentioned at the top, one in Conference USA, the other in the Mountain West. The first game up is Louisiana Tech and North Texas. I project North Texas as a 2.5-point favorite in the total 63.5. FanDuel, meanwhile, has it at North Texas by 1.5, total 65.5. So close projections here. I'm going to take the under. The juice is on the over, so there's some value on the under 65.5 at minus 106. So that's going to be my play for the Conference USA game tonight. That's at 6 o'clock. 9:30 on CBS Sports Network, you have Air Force and Utah State. I project Air Force as a 2.5-point favorite in the total 47. Air Force is favored by a whopping 11.5, total 51.5. I love Utah State again getting the points. They won last week as a 5.5-point dog against Colorado State. I think they have this one too against a spread standpoint. I do not think they'll win, but I just think that number is very big. So give me Utah State plus 11.5 to keep that game somewhat respectable tonight. So you have it for the picks. Louisiana Tech, North Texas under 65.5. And Utah State plus 11.5 against Air Force. Now we'll move on to college basketball. We'll go over the results from last night and look ahead to a less busier slate today. You had a lot of big games yesterday in college basketball. Indiana over Stanford, 79-63. Indiana 3-1, Stanford 1-2. Florida over Army, 76-69. Florida 1-0, Army 3-1. Number 17, Texas over number 14, North Carolina, 69-67 on a step-back jumper by Matt Coleman with 0.1 seconds left. Texas 4-0, UNC 3-1. Number 23, Ohio State over Morehead State, 77-44. Kent State over Point Park, 90-41. South Florida over Florida Gulf Coast, 76-57. Cincinnati over Lipscomb, 67-55. Penn State over VCU, 72-69. Pacific over Montana State, 74-70 in overtime. BYU over St. John, 74-68, so best bet was a winner. Eastern Kentucky over South Carolina, upstate 95-78. Illinois State over Greenville. Check this score out, guys. 177-108. Clemson over South Carolina State, 75-38. Duquesne over UNC Greensboro, 81-68. Number 1 Gonzaga over number 11 West Virginia, 87-82 in Game 1 of the Jimmy V Classic. Flagler upset Central Michigan, 92-73. Georgia over North Georgia, 84-62. Michigan over Ball State, 84-65. Hartford over Fairfield, 66-61. Furman over South Wesleyan, 89-49. South Dakota State upsets Iowa State, 71-68. Jacksonville defeats Presbyterian, 78-65. Wichita over Oral Roberts, 85-80. Texas A&M over Tarleton, 73-66. SIU Edwardsville over Northern Illinois, 73-53. Xavier over Tennessee Tech, 79-48. Rhode Island over Seton Hall, 76-63. Alabama over Providence, 88-71. McNeese over Dallas Christian, 148-37. Middle Tennessee over Murray State, 78-61. Southern Illinois over Southeast Missouri State, 87-79 in overtime. Drexel over Quinnipiac, 66-48. UAB over Kennesaw State, 73-48. Number 22, Florida State over North Florida, 86-58. Tennessee Martin over Evansville, 93-87 in double overtime. Southern Miss over William Carey, 80-53. Utah Valley over Westminster, Utah, 79-71. SMU over Houston Baptist, 102-75. Old Dominion over Norfolk State, 80-66. Memphis over Arkansas State, 83-54. Texas Rio Grande over A&M Corpus Christi, 62-59. Louisiana over New Orleans, 66-63. Missouri over number 21 Oregon, 83-75. UC Irvine over La Sierra, 104-54. Dixie State over North Dakota, 74-73. Northwestern over Arkansas Pine Bluff, 92-49. San Fran over Nevada, 85-60. Wyoming over Incarnate Word, 94-83 in overtime. Arkansas over Texas Arlington, 72-60. San Diego State over St. Catherine, 83-41. Davidson over UNLV, 77-73. Number 2 Baylor over number 5 Illinois, 82-69 in Game 2 of the Jimmy V Classic. Southeast Louisiana over Cal Baptist, 81-80. Washington State over Oregon State, 59-55. And Santa Clara over Cal State Bakersfield, 53-47. All right. The slate today. 2 o'clock. Quinnipiac and Drexel. I project Drexel as a 15-point favorite over Quinnipiac. ESPN doesn't have a line. FanDuel doesn't either. But I would project Drexel obviously wins, so I'm going to say Drexel wins. You got Latour now against Rice. We can skip that one. Chicago State and Eastern Illinois. I project Eastern Illinois by 29. They're 24.5. I'm going to lay with Eastern Illinois. The value's on them at minus 106. So give me Eastern Illinois minus the 24.5. And that's a 3 o'clock game. 4 o'clock, Winthrop and Little Rock. I project Winthrop by a half. Winthrop's favored by 1.5. Total 54 or 154.5. This is tough. I'm going to take over 154.5, and the value's there at minus 105 because I only have a point off on my projection. By the way, potentially starting tomorrow, we'll do totals. If not tomorrow, next week. 4:30 UMass Lowell and NC State on ESPNU. NC State's I have projected as a 20.5 point favorite. They're favored by 15.5. So I'm going to lay it with NC State minus 15.5. Although the juice is on them at minus 114. Merrimack and Iona got canceled today, according to Rick Pitino on Twitter, due to COVID issues. That would have been a 6 o'clock game. Columbia International, Coastal Carolina, Regent Longwood. You can both skip those. Those are 6 o'clock games as well. Tennessee Tech and Northern Kentucky is also a 6 o'clock game. I project Northern Kentucky as a 5-point favorite. Northern Kentucky is laying 11.5. So I'm taking Tennessee Tech plus the 11.5. Juices on them at minus 115. Washington and Utah, I project Utah by 4.5. Utah is favored by 7.5, so I'm going to take the Huskies plus the 7.5. I don't like this pick that much, but got to do what you got to do. They are plus 7.5 at minus 115, so the juice is on them. 7 o'clock, you got Purdue, Northwestern against Bowling Green. You could skip that one. Newberry, Western Carolina. We could skip that as well. Florida National against FAU. St. Francis, Pennsylvania against Liberty. I project Liberty as a 7-point favorite over St. Fran, Pennsylvania. They're favored by 10.5. So I'm taking St. Francis, Pennsylvania. I don't really love this pick, but like I said, you got to do what you got to do. Plus 10.5 at minus 105. So there's value on St. Francis, Pennsylvania. NC&T in the Citadel. I project NC&T as an 8.5-point favorite. And they're only favored by 1.5. So I'm going to lay the 1.5 with NC&T. There's a ton of value on them at minus 104. Marshall and Wright State. I project Wright State as a 0.5-point favorite. Wright State, for some reason, I don't see the game on the board here. ESPN has it Marshall 1.5, and I have it Wright State by 0.5. So I'm going to take Wright State plus the 1.5 and bank on them to win the game outright. UConn, USC, 7 o'clock, ESPN, the Roman Legends Classic. I project UConn by 6. And UConn is laying 1.5. And that is a ton of juice on USC, plus 1.5 and minus 122. I'm the opposite. I'm laying the 1.5 with UConn plus 100. So UConn minus 1.5 and even money is wonderful. So give me UConn minus that 1.5. 7:30 UL Monroe against Louisiana Tech. I project La Tech by 22.5. Meanwhile, La Tech's giving 13.5, so I'm going to lay the 13.5 with Louisiana Tech. The juice is on them, though, at minus 115. Western Illinois at number 3, Iowa, 8 o'clock, Big Ten Network. I project Iowa by 40. And Iowa is giving 35.5. So I'm going to lay the 35.5 with Iowa. The juice is on them at minus 114. We can skip Washburn, Kansas. VMI at number 16, Virginia Tech. I project Vatech by 9.5. Vitech's giving 21.5. So I'm going to take the underdog VMI plus a 21.5 to bank on that game to be close. Niagara against Syracuse. I project Syracuse by 21. Syracuse is... This is another one I don't see the line here on my screen on FanDuel. ESPN has Syracuse by 21 as well, so same line. I'll just say Syracuse wins. I don't know who covers. Omaha against Drake. I project Drake by 4. They're laying 9.5, so I'm going to take Omaha plus 9.5, although the juice is on them at minus 114. East Texas Baptist and Grambling we can skip. Seattle against UCLA. I project UCLA by 33. UCLA is giving 19.5, so I'm going to lay the 19.5 with the Bruins at home against Seattle. UTSA against Oklahoma. I project Oklahoma by 17.5. They are giving 14.5, so I'm going to lay the 14.5 with Oklahoma I'll bite heavy juice at minus 118. Northwestern State against TCU. I project TCU by 21.5. TCU is giving 20.5, so I don't have a point of value here, so I'm going to switch over to the total, 140.5. This is a hard one to project. I'm going to go, I don't feel good about it, but I'm going to go with the under here at 140.5. Heavy juice, though, at minus 114, or slight juice, I should say, on the under. Idaho and Sacramento State, so a Big Ten conference game tonight. Or, I'm sorry, Big Sky conference game. I can't believe I just said Big Ten conference game. Alrighty, so I project Sacramento State by 15.5. Meanwhile, they are giving 10.5. So I'm going to lay the 10.5 with Sacramento State against Idaho. 9 o'clock, Montana, Southern Utah. Another Big Sky conference game. I project Montana by 5.5. Meanwhile, Montana is only giving 1.5. So I'm going to lay the 1.5 of Montana. Values on them at minus 106. St. John's, number 17, Texas Tech canceled due to COVID issues. That would have been a good Big East Big 12 battle. 9:30, St. Catherine, Pepperdine. And then on ESPN, Florida, Boston College in the Roman Legends Classic. I project the Gators by 21. They're laying 7.5. So give me Florida minus 7.5 against Boston College. And the juice is on Boston College. So I'm getting some value here at Florida minus 7.5 at minus 104. 10 o'clock, you got a Pac-12 conference game between number 25 Arizona State and Cal. I project Arizona State by 15.5. They're only laying 7.5, so I'm laying the 7.5 with Bobby Hurley and the Sun Devils here. And last but not least, Texas Southern against St. Mary's. I project St. Mary's by 16.5. They're only 15.5, so 1 point off. 136.5 is the total. I'm going to take the under. 136.5 minus 110 between Texas Southern and St. Mary's for my pick there, since I'm only a point off in my line projection. Now I want to talk about the Los Angeles Lakers and the big things they did last night. First, it was announced that Lakers and LeBron James agreed to a 2-year, $85 million extension that would pay LeBron, I believe, $44.5 million a year. That is an interesting extension for LeBron. So he's tied to the Lakers until the 2022-2023 season. He was supposed to have a player option, I believe, after this season, this upcoming season. But no, he got the extension, and he's signed up for 3 more years with the Los Angeles Lakers. So at least the Lakers have a little bit of security with the best player in the world. And then the second best player on their team, who is a top 10 player in the world, and Anthony Davis, has finally agreed to the 5-year, $190 million extension. Huge deal for the Lakers. It was bound to happen. They got it done, and that just cemented the very best offseason in the NBA in this brief offseason. Not just that, but the best offseason I've ever seen from a reigning champion, perhaps in any sport. I mean, you could argue that the Dodgers could potentially come somewhat close to topping that, depending on the moves they make this offseason. But the Lakers, it's hard to top what they've done. Extend LeBron James, re-sign Anthony Davis, sign Montrezl Harrell away from the Clippers, trade for Dennis Schroeder, sign Wesley Matthews. Like, those are really, really good. And I mean very, very good signings and re-signings for the franchise. I mean, I do think they'll miss Rajon Rondo on defense and his big game prowess. But Schroeder is very good. He could start for them. Avery Bradley, someone else that's been in big games, but his defensive play has slipped a little bit lately. Dwight Howard's not Dwight Howard from 10 years ago. So everything they made was upgrades. I mean, Danny Green, I think somebody else they'll miss. 3-and-D guy. But Wesley Matthews is not the worst replacement in the world. So, yeah, the Lakers just cap off an A-plus offseason with extending LeBron James and giving Anthony Davis the max contract that he deserves. Now I want to recap last night's episode of The Masked Singer. It was the Super 6. My mistake on the podcast yesterday is that I had no idea that it was going to be a triple elimination, the semifinals. So, and another programming note for The Masked Singer is that the finale is 2 weeks from yesterday, not a week from yesterday. So, we're going to have to wait another couple weeks to find out who's under the 3 remaining masks. So without further ado, we'll go over last night's episode. It's the Super 6. The group performance was to Take On Me by Aha. They gave away special clues in the Super 6 group performance. Crocodile, Jeans Black. Mushroom, Cooling Court. Sun, Early Riser. Jellyfish, Ups and Downs. Popcorn, Lasso Lane. Seahorse, Soul Street. The guest panelist was Craig Robinson, who is going to be the host of The Masked Dancer. And The Masked Dancer is a show we'll cover on this podcast. That show starts on December 27th. So, on the December 26th podcast, we will... the December 24th podcast. December 26th is a Saturday. I got my days mixed up there for a second. So, on the Christmas Eve podcast, or the day before Christmas Eve, depending on what I decide to do, I think we'll probably do one on Christmas Eve because we're going to have NBA Christmas, college basketball. So, yeah, we'll do a podcast Christmas Eve, and that's when we will preview The Masked Dancer a little bit. And then, obviously, we'll recap The Masked Dancer on the December 28th show on that Monday morning. So Craig Robinson was the guest panelist for tonight. Very appropriate considering that he will be the host of The Masked Dancer. And Ken Jeong, by the way, is a judge on that show, as well as Paul Abdul, Brian Austin Green, who was a contestant on The Masked Singer this year, ironically enough. And Ashley Tisdale. So the Seahorse. She talks about coming out of her shell. Her super clue was a telescope. She performed That's What I Like by Bruno Mars. I was thinking Carrie Underwood for the longest time. And then in this performance and in little bits and pieces throughout Seahorse's journey, she has sounded like Britney Spears. So that was my guess after tonight. And then the big clue, like after performance clue, was the connection clue to one of the panelists, or the host. In her case, it was Nick. And her connection clue to Nick was that he was a good host to her. So that this person must have been on Nick Cannon's show. Robin Thicke went with Tori Kelly. Jenny McCarthy went with Kesha. And Craig Robinson went with Sia. Crocodile talked about having 2 kids and driving 8 hours after the show to go see them. And his super clue was a pizza rat. He performed I Don't Want to Miss a Thing by Aerosmith, which was out of this world good. I was thinking Donnie Wahlberg for a long time. And now I have a new guess for Crocodile, and I'm going to go with the guy that I was convinced was the turtle last season, and that is Backstreet Boys' AJ McLean. And what made me think of it was the connection clue to Craig. And he said to Craig is that he wants to share the screen with him again, and he can't wait to do so. Obviously, Craig Robinson was in a movie that the Backstreet Boys were a part of This Is the End. So This Is the End is the tie to the Backstreet Boys. So that's why I believe that Crocodile is indeed AJ McLean. And that's who Craig guessed as well. And then Ken Jeong went with Nick Lachey. Mushroom was next. And Mushroom was talking about his experience on the show. And his super clue was a clock that had 6 o'clock and then had 3 o'clock on it. And Mushroom performed Valerie by Amy Whitehouse. And that was his best performance of the season as well. I'm going to go with a very ballsy guess here of Usher. The way he sounded in this performance, I was getting Usher vibes. And it was surreal. So I'm going to go with Usher for the Mushroom. And the connection clue was to Robin. And he said it wasn't the first time they connected. Robin sticking with his Jaden Smith guess. Nicole is going with Jordan Fisher. Craig Robinson went with Leslie Odom Jr. and Ken Jeong went with Keegan Michael Key. The jellyfish. There's a lot of sea hints in there too, like under the sea sort of thing. And her super clue was the Eiffel Tower. And she performed Stay by Rihanna, and this was perhaps her best performance of the year too. I stuck with my original guess of Joey King here. And then her connection clue was to Ken. And she said to Ken is that she tried to reach out to him. And then Ken went with Olympian gold medalist Chloe Kim, who is one of the more underrated snowboarders in the and athletes in the Olympics. And then Nicole Scherzinger went with Crimes. And Robin Thicke went with none other than Gabby Douglas, who is a Olympic gold medalist herself. Popcorn hints about the merry-go-round again. Season's been around for decades, and her super clue was a stop sign. And then she sang Better Be Good to Me by Tina Turner. And I'm thinking in my head, this could very well be the very first time we have a contestant sing their own song. I went with Tina Turner. And the connection clue was to Jenny and talked about in the past never they talked to Jenny in the past and then but they never talked about that they're both published authors. Or authors, my bad. And then Jenny went with Taylor Dayne, who she mentioned in the past. And throw out Mary Wilson, that's who Craig said as well. And then Robin Thicke went with Tina Turner. And then he switched up to Bette Midler, which would have been a stunner for me. And then last to go was the Sun. And then she said that in her clue package is that she felt that she wasn't trying enough because she was doing it for fun, but it brought competition out in her. And then she said that she had the hunger and the drive. And her super clue was breathing fire. Maybe that's a hint towards a dragon. And then she performed When the Party's Over by Billie Eilish. This was the best performance in Masked Singer history. This, to me, supplants the Monsters' Stay With Me from season 1 as the best performance in Masked Singer history. And not only did that Stay With Me performance make Nicole Scherzinger cry, this performance by Sun made her cry too. And I was thinking Christina Aguilera for the longest time for Sun. I have a new guess. I think this is Lady Gaga. I kept re-listening to this performance. And there's a lot of similar note hits as Gaga would make. And Gaga, I think, is perhaps the most talented singer of this century. I think she's that special. And I think that there's a shot that this is her. And then her connection clue was to Nicole Scherzinger and said that they met in the bathroom. I mean, Nicole could have met anybody in the bathroom. Obviously, Gaga first rose to the scenes, and the Pussycat Dolls were still together, like When I Grow Up and I Hate This Part. So these two obviously must have crossed paths at some event. Nicole Scherzinger guessed Leanne Rimes and Brady Carlisle. Ken Jeong went with Kate Hudson, and Craig Robinson went with Emilia Clarke. So, obviously, how this broke was that the two Group A contestants, the two Group B contestants, and the two Group C contestants had face-offs, and then the three losers went home. So, in Group B actually went before Group A. Crocodile advanced, Seahorse went home. Group C, Mushroom advanced, Jellyfish went home. And then in Group A, Sun advanced, Popcorn went home. And this is a very talented group. Like, Popcorn, I thought, was better than Gladys Knight, the B in Season 1. And Gladys Knight was pretty good, but I thought Popcorn was more talented. So, Popcorn unmasked first. My first impression guess was Tina Turner. My final guess was Tina Turner. Nicole's first impression guess was Diana Ross, and her final guess was Taylor Dayne. Robin Thicke's first impression guess was Tina Turner. He stuck with Tina Turner. Jenny McCarthy's first impression guess was Tina Turner. And then her final guess was Taylor Dayne. Ken Jeong's first impression guess was Tina Turner. His final guess was Tina Turner. And Craig Robinson's final guess was Taylor Dayne. And who was it? It was indeed Taylor Dayne, who is a big get for the show. She's a big 80s singer. Listen to My Heart was one of her big hits. And good for Taylor Dayne. She looked very pretty, too. She looked fantastic. And good for her. She really could have won any other year. But it's just sad that she's not in the finals this year due to the talented other contestants that did advance to the final. So it was no fault of her own. Jellyfish unmasked next. My first impression guess was Joey King, and that was my final guess as well. Robin Thicke's first impression guess was Addison Rae. His final guess was Gabby Douglas. Jenny McCarthy's first impression guess was Daisy Ridley. Her final guess was Michaela Maroney. Nicole Scherzinger's first impression guess was Sophia Richie. Her final guess was Brimes. Ken Jeong's first impression guess was Yara Shahidi. His final guess was Chloe Kim, and Craig Robinson went with Ken Jeong with Chloe Kim. And who was it? It was Chloe Kim. Ken Jeong was correct. So that is the second time this season where Ken Jeong was correct. The other time being Lonzo Ball for the whatchamacallit. So Ken Jeong correct for the second time this season and for the fifth time ever. So now Ken Jeong has more correct guesses than seasons of The Masked Singer. Actually, he has 6. He got Bob Saget right. So this is this season he matched his number of correct guesses combined. So good for Ken. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he does guessing-wise on The Masked Dancer. And then last unmasked was Seahorse. My first impression guess was Carrie Underwood. I thought it was her for the longest time. My final guess was a ridiculous Britney Spears. Ken Jeong's first impression guess was Fergie, which would have been a great get for The Masked Singer. She's very talented. One of the more underrated singers in her genre and her era. And his final guess was Christina Aguilera, who I thought the sun was for the longest time. So that's a little bit of irony there. Robin Thicke's first impression guess was JoJo. His final guess was Tori Kelly. Jenny McCarthy's first impression guess was Halsey. Her final guess was Halsey. Nicole Scherzinger's first impression guess was Mary Morris. Her final guess was Tori Kelly. Craig Robinson jumped on the Tori Kelly bandwagon. And who was it? It was Tori Kelly. So Tori Kelly was yet another big get for The Masked Singer. she obviously is pretty big right now. She obviously is featured in a couple songs as she really has made a name for herself over the last couple years. And like I said, good for her. One of the more talented singers over the past couple years. And she performed last night actually on the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lighting show. So that's a little ironic. And I think that she's going to be around for a little bit. And any other year she could have won. And she had perhaps her worst performance of the year last night. So if she had any of her other performances in this episode, and that's what I like performance in a past episode, I think she could have got away with it. But no, she got sent home, and Sun, Mushroom, and Crocodile are on to the finale for season 4. Alrighty then. Best bet of the day brought to you by FanDuel. There's some good ones that I like for today in college basketball. I considered Utah State against Air Force in college football, but I really like some of these college basketball lines a little bit better. And the one I'm going to roll with for today, I'm going to go with the Florida Gators minus 7.5 against Boston College. I don't think Boston College is very good, so I'm going to lay the 7.5 with the Gators against Boston College. So that's it for the show today. I'll be back tomorrow recapping the college football and college basketball from today and looking ahead to tomorrow and the weekend. I'll do Fab 5 picks for college football and the NFL as well. And any other news that breaks in the world of sports. Maybe we'll have some baseball free agency news to talk about. I'll have for you on the show. Well, I hope you guys have a great day, everyone.